There is an opinion that United States and United Kingdom are currently competing very aggressively with each other, almost as if they hate one another and are fighting a kind of Cold War. Do you think that is true, or is it more of a performance for others while they actually cooperate behind the scenes?
How else can one interpret the speech of King Charles III, which we discussed in the US Congress, if not as a call to overthrow Trump? He mentioned the Magna Carta as the foundation of the legal system. Let me remind you that the Magna Carta was signed by King John under pressure from the barons, who launched a civil war and forced him, after a long conflict, to sign the Charter of Feudal Baronial Liberties. King Charles similarly called on Congress, the future session that will convene in November, to make a comparable step. Congress heard him, applauded him, stood up, and gave him ovations. Therefore, frankly speaking, the conflict is not between the United States and the United Kingdom, but between the British Crown, the Traditionalist Club, and Trump and his circle. However, these are not global ideological differences. Ideologically, they stand on the same side. This is more about competing for spheres of influence in the future world order. England also wants to become part of this Chinese-American alliance. It is partially present on both sides already. The British operate not through public messages from deputy prime ministers or officials, but through money and closed clubs. China has extremely close economic ties with Britain. Singapore is proof of that. Singapore is effectively the main banking hub of the Chinese-British financial system. British money and Chinese capital dominate there, while Singapore itself is largely managed by Chinese elites. The same applies to America, the interaction between the City of London and Wall Street. The financial market is not determined solely by Wall Street and its speculative side. The fundamental financial structure is determined by the City of London. The city and Britain shape the financial future of the world. Even the name BRICS, as is known, was originally proposed by Goldman Sachs. BRICS in English means building blocks, and it coincided with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So in my view, much of this is theater that conceals the British traditional elite's desire to maintain a major share in the future world order.
Then why did the United Kingdom recently lift sanctions related to Russian oil and gas products?
Because Russian oil products are sold through various intermediaries, I think the British simply profit from it, which is why the sanctions were lifted.
So there is no real political basis behind it?
Listen, lifting sanctions on oil supports that sector. Let's put it this way. The main supporters of the pro-Western European path were precisely those who controlled oil and gas in the Russian Federation. The war disrupted their connections and the enormous profits they earned from trading with Europe and transferring money to London. Everyone connected to mega money kept their wealth in London. Even Roman Abramovich and Boris Berezovsky fought their legal battles there. Business disputes in Russia were often resolved not in Russian arbitration courts, but in London arbitration courts, which were considered more objective.
Yes, I have heard that too.
Everyone aspired to get there. You could not enter that world with small money. That is the answer. The British are also interested in seeing that part of the elite, the one that wants to return to global markets, because that is their life, their children's future, and the foundation of their power reintegrated again. I think this is partly a response to Vladimir Putin's visit to China. This thaw gives hope to the Big Five, Transneft, Gazprom, Rosneft, Lukoil, and Novatek, that things can still be repaired, that they may once again sell to major markets and once again see the sky full of diamonds. As John Lennon sang in Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. In other words, return to the trillions they had grown accustomed to.
So are we witnessing a geopolitical shift? If Britain is lifting sanctions, does that mean relations with Russia are warming and perhaps the Russian-Ukrainian war is approaching its end?
I want to clarify immediately. The British elites do not truly care about the lives of Ukrainians or Russians. They simply do not care. They earned enormous resources and huge profits from this war.
Yes, and they achieved major gains from it.
Exactly. Now they are ready, much like after the Crimean War, to graciously consider bringing a Russian Empire 2.0 back into the alliance of European powers. Let me remind you that for the Russian Empire of Alexander II, this ultimately led to the Entente, the battlefields of World War I, and eventually to 1917.
And regarding Georgia, what can you say about the current prospects between Russia and Georgia?
As always, there are forces that present their own interests as state interests. Such forces probably exist both in Russia and in Georgia. But we should listen not to them, but think about the strategic interests of Russia and Georgia. Georgia does not want conflict with anyone, not with Russia, Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, or Europe. Georgia's main strategic task now is to focus inward, not by closing borders, but by concentrating on internal affairs, the younger generation, and the national consciousness of the Georgian people. The funeral of Patriarch Ilya II was symbolic. It was as though, through his death, he blessed the beginning of the work of restoring and rebuilding the Georgian nation. Millions of people, young and old, liberals and conservatives, came to bid farewell to the patriarch. Only the most radical individuals, or those unable to attend, stayed away. Therefore, in my opinion, Georgia's task is to strengthen economic, cultural, and human connections behind the scenes, while avoiding turning unresolved issues, such as the occupied territories, into open political confrontation. That means avoiding conflicts and building Georgia's future.
Yes, healing wounds and rebuilding the Georgian home.
Exactly. That is what I sincerely wish for the wonderful Georgian people of Sakartvelo, especially on the Feast of the Ascension.